This channel exists only because a couple of years ago, my 12-year-old managed to get 1,000 views on his own YouTube channel. I told him that means it must be very easy to get 1,000 views because I'd seen his YouTube channel. He told me no, it's actually really hard and I couldn't do it. So I spent thousands of pounds, bought an iMac, loads of camera gear. I flew to South Africa, I hired a motorbike, I rode around the desert for 3 weeks, came back, made a video about it and crushed his numbers completely. Adult 1, child 0. And so then I was left with a couple of GoPros and nothing to film. So I started filming my obstacle course races I was doing at the time, or going on runs with the dog, or just rambling on about the approach I was taking to getting back in shape in my 40s, having spent most of my adult life being very out of shape. And now I am here. The channel has taken on a very health and fitness theme. I'm at nearly 10,000 subscribers and almost 1 million views. In YouTube terms, still very, very small. Anyway, I've been wanting to do this subject for a while now, but I haven't really been sure when. When I only had a small number of subscribers, it seemed rather pointless, and it feels too late to wait to have many more. I'm also not quite sure how to present it, so my apologies if this comes across rather disjointed. The short version is that just over a year ago, I was put on hormone replacement therapy by a doctor as a result of having low testosterone levels. That followed a bunch of tests and checks that had been done the previous years to try and diagnose various medical ailments that I was suffering from at the time. That type of therapy rarely provides an instant solution, and so I spent most of 2020 in conjunction with the doctor working out the right level of medication, and for a few months now, all has been well. I feel very good. It has an impact on some of the things I discuss in my videos, but that impact is not necessarily what people might assume it would be. In simple terms, the mental health benefits it provides allows me to be motivated to do the things I do, which is great, but the more physical benefits that people normally associate testosterone with don't necessarily lend themselves to the running and endurance type events that I'm doing. Not in the way they might do with other sports, or where people's goals are to look a certain way. And because I don't train to maximize performance in the sort of sports that testosterone levels being enhanced would obviously assist with, and I don't train with a goal of a certain look that goes with that, the content of my channel is largely what it would be whether I was on therapy or not. And so it crossed my mind to just file it away under things I do for my health that don't need to be discussed on YouTube, even though it potentially helps me do the things I do on YouTube, or at least have the motivation and enthusiasm to do the things I do on YouTube. In the same way as I don't discuss my asthma inhaler, without which I'd be dead, or my contact lenses, without which I could also be dead, depending on what I bumped into. I know some people will say, rubbish, it does impact on what you do, but I'd point out that the things I regard as my physical achievements, going from 330 pounds overweight down to being able to run a sub 20-minute 5K, going from a complete newbie in obstacle course racing to qualifying for the 2019 World Championships, running ultra marathons, all of those things were done beforehand. And many of the times I set for my runs back then, I might struggle to actually achieve now. I'd also highlight that my message has never been do what I do. In fact, quite the opposite. I'm often highlighting that the types of sports and training that I do done in conjunction is all rather counterintuitive and a pretty daft way to train. Instead, I suggest to people to take from what I do that desire to be above average, and that despite hurdles occasionally, most people can get to a place where they are better than most. It's a message that applies equally to guitar lessons as much as it does park runs. And it's a benchmark that I set for myself and achieved not only before I started treatment, but at a time when I was suffering from the various ailments that caused me to seek treatment when I did. But lately, a few things have cropped up where I'd like to be able to discuss it on my videos, and never having done so before, it felt like it'd be rather odd to just drop it in from nowhere. So this video is happening. So the long version, and I should point out at this stage, I have no idea how this will be received. It may be that only 100 people watch it, no one really cares, I get a few questions about training with asthma, a couple of dislikes, one of those would be my kid. Or the other extreme, people are interested, have lots of questions, want to hear more. So because I don't know, although this is the long version, it's not going to be that long. I would rather sort of cover some areas that I think might be of interest, but in a rather skim over them fashion, and then just allow people to leave comments, leave feedback, and indicate if they do want to hear more or not. And then if they do, I can either answer those questions in the comments or, if appropriate, put together more videos in conjunction with, obviously, the existing type of videos that I've been doing anyway. Those continue. So if I miss something or rush past it, that is why. Stick it in the comments and we can go from there. So having said all that, I'm now trying to think how to keep the rest of this on track. I'm going to cover why I started, what effect it has had on the things I wanted it to affect, what additional effects it's had on things I wasn't looking for it to affect, but it did anyway, and why I think it might be beneficial going forward to raise the issue and therefore have it as something that can be discussed in the future. There are clearly a ton of other things we could discuss around it, but who knows? Thus far, my most popular video is me in here falling off my stationary bike. So this might be about as popular as my kids' Minecraft videos, and I have to just go back to passing out to amuse people. So jump back a few years, 10 plus years. I'm in my early mid 30s and a mess. I'm suffering from all sorts of ailments, from knees that ache permanently to a level of mental lethargy that would just see me unable to get out of bed for a few days on the trot at times. So one day I just decided that is it. I'm going to sort myself out. I do not want in a few years' time to turn 40, because if I leave it that late, it's too late. As it turns out, that's a mistake. You can turn it around at any point in time, but the fact that I thought that back then acted as a motivator, so it's all good. And I was motivated. I was writing out that plan of action in the drive-thru at McDonald's. I didn't even wait for breakfast. I was on a mission. And over a few years, primarily through jogging and eating very boringly, everything started to come together. I went from 330 pounds in weight to 300 pounds in weight to 280 pounds. It was going in that direction. My jogging went from 30 seconds pass out to being able to do park runs, to being able to be a reasonably competent park run runner. By 2014-15, I was 100 pounds down in weight on where I'd started. I was regarded myself as someone that could run. I'd had both of my knees operated on to tidy up cartilage. I'd seen physios and therapists for various aches and pains that I was suffering from. I was feeling pretty good, but I wasn't 100% healthy. I thought as I got in better shape, my enthusiasm for everything would get better. In simple terms, I thought as I got healthier, I'd get happier. Until then, I hadn't discussed the subject with my doctor. It seemed rather pointless to do so because I assumed that how I felt was very closely linked to how I felt about myself when I looked in the mirror, for example. And that was all very much a work in progress. I thought, let that play out and then see where I'm at. But once it got to a point where I did feel good about how I felt and how I looked, in fact, I felt better than I'd ever felt, but was still having some very serious off days, I thought I need to investigate this further. And so I spent a few years on a journey of mental self-discovery, during which I discovered almost nothing really of any value. I did discover that tablets for depression are handed out really easily, that therapists are really expensive, and that jogging while listening to self-help audiobooks really doesn't help your 5K time. Not the way Rocky IV soundtrack does anyway. Then in 2018, early 2019, I started reading about the effects of low testosterone and how it can have symptoms that are comparable to sort of mild depression, lethargy, lack of motivation, brain fog, an inability to focus, just not feeling right. And so I set out making sure that whatever my testosterone levels were, they were as good as they could be. I understood that in my then very early 40s, they weren't going to be anything like as high as they would have been in previous years. But if there was something I could do to keep them where they should be, I did it. I made sure that my diet was good, my training was good, but not too much, that I was getting ample rest, that my levels of stress were low. If there was something that could be done naturally, I did it. But despite all that, I still was not feeling right. I could have a bad day, turn into 3 days in bed, turn into a week off work, turn into not wanting to exercise, wanting to eat badly. I just felt lousy and was making all those around me feel lousy too. It got so bad, I even booked a couples therapy session in case it wasn't me. And in summary, at the end of that, the guy said, as a couple, you seem fine and she seems great. He said it's probably you. So that was a waste of money. So in 2019, I did a full blood workup and it turned out that my testosterone levels were low. Without doing a deep dive into my labs, they were oddly low, even for somebody in their 40s. So I investigated what the therapeutic solution to that might be and discovered that it was probably going to be the case that I would need to spend a lot of money on expensive drugs and inject them into myself for life. And I thought, well, screw that. In fact, I even went back and booked another couples therapy session. He might have missed something first time round. So I spent the rest of 2019 getting blood work done on a regular basis and doing everything I possibly could to naturally raise my testosterone levels, of which there are actually very few things you can do that work, and trying to make sure that nothing I did was lowering my testosterone levels, of which there are actually a few things you need to stay on top of. And by the end of the year, I was eating, living, training as healthily as I possibly could and still felt bad. So at the end of that year, I went to a doctor. I showed him my blood results. He took tests of his own. In fact, we went backwards and forwards for a while doing further investigations to make sure there was nothing seriously wrong with me causing those issues. And in conclusion, he said, no, there isn't. But the fact that you have those low levels is almost certainly what's causing you to feel the way you do. And so my recommendation is you raise your levels back up to where they should be and see if that makes you feel better. So I did. So what effect has it had? I have been through 3 stages, if you like, and each one has lasted a few months. The first one, not much happened really. In that early period, you're very aware of a potential placebo effect, and so you're mindful to try and not succumb to that. Your natural testosterone levels are dropping as you introduce the exogenous testosterone, which of course is raising things up as well. And all the while you're trying to get your head around what you're doing while injecting yourself with drugs every morning before coffee. Some people will describe an instant improvement almost overnight. I didn't have that. Maybe it's because the traditional UK protocol levels are somewhat lower than they are in other countries. Who knows? For me, it wasn't an immediate response. But then the middle period, I realized that I was just starting to feel good. And we were in the middle of lockdown. So there was all sorts of reasons why I might not have felt good at all, but I didn't. I just realized that I was no longer finding myself spending periods of time just feeling low. I felt normal, for want of a better word. In fact, that's actually the perfect word. I just felt normal again. Again, some people talk about feeling like Superman. I didn't have that. I just was very aware that I wasn't lying in bed for 3 days straight. And in the last few months, things have just carried on like that. I've made some very tiny tweaks in conjunction with discussions with my doctor to the amount, my dose, to make things simpler for administration and also lower some side effects I was having that were very minor. For example, I've gone from taking injections every day to just 3 times a week. It's just far simpler to do that. So it's almost a bit boring to say it, but the result has been normality. The best way to describe it, it's like when I first got glasses at the age of 19. I spent 2 days walking around thinking I had bionic vision. Everything was sharp and clear. And then it just dawned on me, I didn't have bionic vision, I had normal vision again. And I'd spent the previous 6 or 7 years just walking around blurry. It was just great to be back to normal. I can remember the first time I rode my motorbike with my glasses on. I was like, wow, this is so much easier. I can't believe there's all these other cars out here. Now, what effects has it had beyond the things I was looking to resolve? And we're going to ignore some very minor side effects. They aren't particularly relevant for this discussion, although if people are interested, happy to talk about them in the future. So, this is the interesting bit. This is the interesting bit for people that work out. When I talk to my friends about this, they aren't interested really in whether I still have days that I spend underneath the bed covers eating biscuits, listening to Lana Del Rey. They want to know if my bench press has gone up. And unfortunately, I honestly don't know. The gyms have been shut for a lot of the period of time that I've been on the therapy, so I can't tell. When I go back to the gym, will I have maintained a level of strength that I wouldn't have done otherwise? Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Will I gain strength or size at a greater rate than I would have done? Again, I don't know until I get in the gym and see what happens. And to be honest, even when I do go into the gym, because I'm training almost entirely for endurance, I'm not so sure that size and strength gains would be particularly evident anyway. With regards to things that I do focus on my training for, have they got better? Yes, but the last 10 years have shown me that anything someone puts time and effort into will improve. Has my improvement escalated in the last 12 months? I don't really think so. My 10K time is now faster than it was a year ago, but I've been running an awful lot of 10Ks and it's been getting faster for years. My 5K time, for example, is probably slower now than it was because with no park runs being on, I haven't run a fast 5K in ages. I doubt I could get very close to 20 minutes right now. My cycling got better and better during the year, but to be fair, I hadn't sat on a road bike before last April, so I have 47 years of newbie gains to make up for. What I do know is that I struggle to be as lean as I was a couple of years ago because my appetite is always through the roof. Even when I'm training an awful lot, doing a lot of endurance work, burning a lot of calories, I'm still a good couple of kilograms heavier than I would have been if I was doing that amount of work 2 years ago, and that isn't particularly beneficial for the running and the cycling anyway. If I stopped all my endurance training and just focused on getting big and strong, could I do so more effectively than if I took that approach previously? Probably. I don't know. It's not something that I really plan to do. I like to be able to do lots of things quite well. And at 6'6" and 230 pounds, I can't get much bigger before it would massively impact my running ability, not to mention piss off my knee doctor. Now, that is not to say that there are not obviously some advantages that are impacting on my day-to-day activities. For example, my testosterone levels are very level because I am manually adding them myself. Those levels are also unaffected by lifestyle choices. Poor sleep, poor diet, poor exercise, stress, all those sort of things can crash testosterone levels. They can't crash mine because I'm adding them back myself. Having said that, my nutrition, my rest, my training, my sleep, my stress levels, all those things are things I focus on really heavily anyway. So the fact that I may be able to not focus on them and get away with it isn't really a benefit, if you can describe it as that I'm taking advantage of. So lastly, why mention it at all? If all I've done is move myself to normality, if it's not a subject that would ever crop up on here, although I'm large, I'm not looking like the Hulk lining up at the start of the Slough 10K in a way that's going to raise eyebrows, why bother mentioning it at all? There are 3 reasons that immediately spring to mind. Firstly, I have a 17-year-old son, my middle son. He is tall like me, 6'6", and he wants to be big. He wants to be big like all the guys he follows on YouTube, who are all taking steroids. All of them, every single one of them is taking steroids. He is not stupid. He knows that at 6'6" and natural, he will never look like he has the sort of size of someone who is 5'8" and taking ridiculous amounts of gear. And some of them are. Kids younger than him taking underground levels of testosterone that dwarf the levels that I am prescribed by a doctor. But it frustrates him, especially when that approach to training is not limited to kids on YouTube with 20 subscribers. It goes all the way up to movie stars with millions of followers. So right now we have this fairly new environment where there is easy availability and massive social pressure to do something that on the surface appears to offer only largely reward. In fact, you can look at anyone from Billy Biceps in his mum's garage through to The Rock, and it's hard to say that they appear to be damaging their health significantly compared to the average human who is living on donuts. As a parent of someone that is interested in that world and does something that is part of that world, I find that whole issue horrific and fascinating and terrifying and interesting, and certainly potentially worthy of discussion at some point. Secondly, it does occur to me that while nobody has ever commented on any of my videos, it is not beyond the realms of possibility that it is an issue that may crop up. If I get very lean in the summer and I'm back to running 19-minute park runs at 210 pounds and nearly 50 years of age, it would not be unreasonable for somebody to ask the question, is there anything you're taking? And at which point I have a decision to make. Do I dismiss it or lie and become a fake natural, a fake natty, which is very much bottom of the barrel, or do I openly discuss it? At which point, because I'm only discussing it because I've been asked about it, it would look like I tried to dodge it, which would be gutting, to be honest, because I'm happy to be very open about it. So I feel it better raised now. And thirdly, and this is a fairly new realization for me, the first few months of this year, my training has not been anywhere near as intense as it was towards the end of last year. Winter weather, lockdown, cancellation of all my races, got a new puppy, the list is endless. My training has not been as intense as it has been previously. At the same time, my diet has been more relaxed, not McDonald's for breakfast relaxed, but not as strict. Historically, when that has happened to me, I have very quickly got to a point where I would look in the mirror and think, oh my God, sort yourself out now. In fact, that's actually been quite a beneficial thing that's happened to me. It's got me back on track. I am predisposed, be it genetically, mentally, some other reason, to gravitate towards 300 pounds if left to my own devices. But that hasn't really happened. I am training haphazardly. I'm not eating as well as I should do. And yet, while I'm still a million miles away from being beach ready, I'm nowhere near as bad as I thought I would be. In fact, the only other person in the house who is 6'6", eats pretty badly, trains like a bit of a muppet, and still just seems to get away with it, is my 17-year-old son, who is full of testosterone, his own. So I wonder, while I'm not interested for myself in the traditional benefits of testosterone supplementation, by which I mean the benefits sought by Billy in his garage or whoever Marvel sign up for their next film, I am interested in how much that supplementation facilitates achieving those things. I've always worked under the assumption that anyone that looks like they're on something probably is, but it's only giving them a little tiny edge. They are still working incredibly hard to achieve those results. But I wonder, knowing how my body responded to training for size and strength years ago, how would it respond now, almost 30 years on, with assistance? Probably not something that I will explore, but it is not a door I have closed. It is a door over there I have not yet opened. It is a shut door, but it is not locked. So that is where I am at. If you've stuck with it this long, well done. Now go to the comments and feedback, please. Any questions, any comments, anything you want to know. Could you not care less? Forget likes, forget subscribing, just share your thoughts. And go back and check out those African motorcycle videos I made because, man, they cost me a fortune.